According to legend, the vampire is a mythical being who subsists by feeding off the blood of living creatures, the stuff of nightmares prowling through the night, sinking their fangs into their unsuspecting victims. But and do they, as some claim, still exist today?
In a nutshell, a vampire is a man or woman who has died but exists in the afterlife by feeding on the blood of living creatures.
In recent times, there have been numerous exhumations of vampire burials, some of them beheaded with the heads placed between the knees, others with wooden stakes driven through the heart.
There are thousands of them all over the world. Mostly people who have watched Interview with a Vampire, watched True Blood, or read some Twilight book, and that's what they want to be.
There's vampires everywhere. Vampires can be doctors, nurses, solicitors, bank managers. We could be anyone.
There's no benefit in drinking blood. It basically goes through your body and then it's expelled. It actually could be dangerous if you're taking high levels of blood into your system because you could overdose on iron.
This is our vampire killing kit. So this contains everything you might need to dispatch a vampire. Some of the stuff you know from fiction, some of the stuff perhaps from folklore as well.
Vampires exist, but not the way that you think they do. There are people who role play, and there are people who play for real.
According to modern folklore, a vampire is an undead being who rises from the grave and feeds on the blood of living creatures. Typically, they were said to wear shrouds and were often described as having a gaunt, pale face and, of course, a sharp pair of fanged teeth. And killing them, well, that was quite a performance.
According to legend, the best way to kill a vampire is to go in its coffin during the day, of course, when it's helpless because of the light, put a stake through its heart, or cut its head off, or pin it to the coffin, break its legs, nail them to the coffin, so come nighttime, it can't move, it's imprisoned.
Traditionally, they belong to Eastern Europe. In Britain, there are one or two rather pathetic little outbreaks that turn out to be nothing of the sort. In Eastern Europe, the idea that the dead can rise from their graves and suck blood from the living is kind of imprinted in the DNA of the people there. Certainly in rural areas, in Poland, for example, Czechoslovakia, Romania, people totally believe that there are such things as vampires, and they take steps to prevent them from wreaking havoc in the villages.
Bram Stoker's 1897 book, Dracula, is regarded as the quintessential vampire novel and forms the basis of the vampire legend which we understand today. It spawned countless TV shows and films, all dedicated to the fanged phenomena. Real or not, vampires are big business.
Bram Stoker's novel, Dracula, completely changed the game, taking away the Eastern European undead, putrefied, zombie-type figure that rose from the grave to something far more romantic, count with a cane and fangs, and completely changed the thing and sold millions of novels and plays and films.
Bram Stoker's book, Dracula, was huge. I mean, this is where the party starts. And it's because he has the knowledge of all the folktale that's gone before him. Vlad the Impaler, all the other sort of myths and legends about vampires. But what he does is really special. He makes them sophisticated and quite sexy and just a bit daunting.
I am Dracula.
Vampires are infamous for drinking the blood of their victims, often women. And back in the Middle Ages in Europe, people were simply terrified of them. But according to legend, there were certain things that were able to ward off vampires. Garlic is one example, but also sacred items, for example, a crucifix, a rosary, or holy water. Also, according to the law, vampires are said to be unable to walk on consecrated ground, such as churches or temples, or cross running water. Deborah Hyde is an expert on the vampire phenomena and agreed to meet me in a North London cemetery to tell me all about them.
Deborah, what are the origins of the vampire legend?
Well, they seem to be a southern and eastern European folklore construct from at least the 9th century, possibly further back than that. And it continued to exist all through medieval times and even into modern times. Really, we see vampire legends where there's a combination of epidemic death and where people misunderstand the normal processes of decomposition.
And when you say people misunderstand the process of decomposition, what do you mean by that?
We understand that when people die that they eventually decompose, but it's not a uniform or an easy process to predict. And things like the pH of the soil, the temperature of the environment, how deep you manage to bury a body, what somebody died of, all of these kinds of things end up playing into whether they actually decompose in a particularly predictable way.
The legend of vampires starts in Eastern Europe in sort of medieval times. And it starts because people totally misread and misunderstand what happens to a body when it decomposes after death. You know, it sits upright, blood is churned up through the esophagus and out of the mouth, and it looks as though these bodies are still alive in the coffin, but in reality, it's just the natural process of dying and decomposing.
And they found bodies with stakes driven through their hearts in Eastern Europe, haven't they?
They have. It was a perfectly respectable way of getting rid of a vampire to stake them either through their heart or their navel, any part of their body. And we might think that this is a very metaphorical kind of a thing, but it's actually just a very large pin. If you had a body that wasn't buried sufficiently deeply, predators were getting at it, perhaps it was bloating and moving around in the grave, then you could keep it physically where it was by staking it to the ground.
Conversely, it's not just the decomposition, it's the preservation of the bodies. Imagine if you bury your mother in midwinter in a shallow grave and someone goes in digging because they want the clothes, the jewelry, and they see she's perfectly preserved. So hence the legend of the undead is born.
So this is what gave birth to the whole vampire legend that we know of today, right?
Yes, yes, it is. And there's all sorts of things that you could do to actually make sure that that kind of half-dead, half-spiritual, half-alive being was depotentiated. You could stake it, you could burn it to ashes and drink the ashes. You could decapitate it. They're all very kind of mechanical measures that would be taken.
So the killing of a vampire, the driving the stake through the heart, that is actually based on medieval evidence.
Traditional vampires, yes, would be staked into their graves, either through the navel or the heart. And then in romantic literature, they went very much for the heart because it was more symbolic, it was more flamboyant.
Staking through the heart is the most commonly cited method of killing a vampire, particularly in Eastern European cultures. But it was also common practice to bury sharp objects alongside the body, such as sickles, so that they would penetrate the skin if the body tried to leave the grave. In recent years, many of these so-called vampire burials have been discovered in Bulgaria.
Vampires seem to have originated in Eastern Europe in the 12th and 13th century. People in those days misunderstood dead bodies. Putrefaction, the fact that it was very cold in those countries, and people couldn't bury people very deep. They'd come back 3 weeks later to find mother, a child, dug up, dragged out of the grave, half-eaten, blood all over them, and rumours started to spread.
This is Ravadanovo Castle near Sozopol in Bulgaria. In 2014, a so-called vampire burial was unearthed here, where they found a skeleton with a metal stake driven through its torso. According to experts, it belongs to a man aged between 40 and 50 and dates back to the early 13th century. And so far, over 100 of these vampire burials have been unearthed in this country.
In recent times, there have been numerous exhumations of what are known as vampire burials in Eastern Europe. They've found bodies, some of them beheaded, with the heads placed between the knees, others with wooden stakes driven through the heart, stones, huge stones, sometimes in the mouth, and large stones actually sometimes placed on the face, which they believe to be the bodies of vampires, because the whole idea is, of course, to keep them in the grave and not let them rise from the grave.
Well, approximately the last 5 years, there have been about 500 burials found of these supposed vampires. But really what it goes to show is that the dating of these vampire skeletons is that it goes from the 1100s all the way through the 19th century, and it demonstrates a whole fear culture about vampires. Not that vampires actually existed, but that people have been afraid of vampires for a very long time.
The discoveries have made Bulgaria one of the vampire capitals of the world, with literally hundreds of bodies being discovered all over the country. Unusually, rather than the traditional wooden stakes through their hearts, the corpses here were buried with plows, sickles and farming tools embedded in their torsos. In 2012, museum director Bohidar Dimitrov revealed one of the suspected vampire corpses to the world.
Archaeologists dug up these moneyed bloodsuckers whilst excavating a monastery near the Black Sea.
In Sozopol, we unearthed 700 Christian graves and found only 2 traces of anti-vampire manipulation.
And this is where the skeleton they claim to be a vampire is kept, at the Archaeological Museum in Sozopol, and I'm here to meet the man who found it.
The alleged vampire skeleton is on display on the first floor of the museum, and Bohidar has arranged for a local translator so that I could ask him all about the discovery.
Why do you believe this to be a vampire?
Аз съм учен рационалист и не вярвам, но старите българи са вярвали, че човек след като почине, ако е добър, отива на небето в рая. Ако е лош, остава тук на земята. Хората са вярвали, че лошите хора в 12 часа през нощта са излизали от гроба, материализирали са се и са тръгвали да пият кръв на хора и животни. Единственият начин да се предотврати това е било в гроба му. Група младежи обикновено са го правили, са пробивали тялото му на 3-ти и 4-ти ден от смъртта с железен лемеш.
So this looks like a kind of iron axe head. Was this what was used to stab him through the heart?
Това казва прилича на желязна част някаква. Това ли е нещото, с което са намушквали?
Това е. Да, това е силно корозирало, отчупено отгоре, но на места се намират цели. Кой знае защо са смятали, че железният лемеш на плуга това е режещата част на ралото. Са смятали, че точно това трябва да използват.
So this part of the plow would have been driven through this man's torso.
И казва, тази част е била забивана в тялото на...
В сърцето.
Exactly, not only the body, but in the heart.
So they believe that this man was a vampire.
И вие вярвате, че този човек е бил... Хората са вярвали, че този човек е бил вампир.
Че може да стане вампир.
The people believe that this person can become a vampire.
Или може би някой е разправил вече, че го е виждал по улиците на града след 12 часа.
Or some people around put some rumor that they hint him around the streets after midnight.
Right.
In fact, there have been hundreds of so-called vampire corpses dug up across Hungary, Romania and neighbouring countries, all with similar metal farm machinery embedded in their skeletons.
Do people believe that the vampires exist today?
Хората вярват ли, че вампирите съществуват днес?
Да, за наше голямо изумление от един документален филм, сега правен, разбрах, че в Румъния, покрай българската граница, обичая съществува в едно село и сега, а най-неочаквано една млада докторантка от Видин съобщи за подобен случай само преди няколко години в едно село във Видин. Това е северо-западна България.
So what, they're doing it today? They're driving stakes through people's hearts today?
И те го правят също.
Да, сега също.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
The best is, of course, finding burials where the skeleton has a stake through its chest. And they actually call these vampire burials. So it's testament to the fact that this wasn't just some light-hearted belief. It was a really important part of their belief system. And they took it quite seriously indeed.
People were terrified of suicides rising from the grave. And this is really where it came from. Basically, a wooden stake was driven through the heart and a stone placed on the face to stop them rising, because they knew that the suicide wouldn't be at rest, because they knew that the suicide wouldn't get into heaven and didn't want to go to hell and would rise.
There have been hundreds of vampire burials being discovered in Eastern Europe. I mean, it's obviously the tip of the iceberg. Certainly, a few centuries ago, there was what was known as an epidemic of vampires. Whole villages became vampires because their relatives had risen up from the grave and in some way infected them, because it was thought of as a plague. It was a very real thing. It was a physical thing, and they had to do something about it. So they would go to the graves and they would prevent their relatives from getting out of the grave and doing it to other people.
To complete this remarkable story, I was then taken down to the ruins of the old castle in Sozopol, overlooking the ocean, to see the actual grave of the alleged vampire in the museum.
Гроба на вампира е зад олтара на средновековната църква в това съоръжение. Доста монолитно изградено. Тук бяха открити костите.
Okay, and the skeleton was here with the iron through the torso.
И скелета беше с прободеното сърце с този метален предмет.
Да, скелета е положен съобразно християнската практика с предмет в жизненно важен център, в сърдечната област.
And how many vampire graves did they find on the site?
Следи от такива практики, от 700 общо открити в няколко периода на некропола, се забелязват само при мъжки и женски гроб, изградени в съобразно християнската практика в подобни.
The vampire graves bring to light the fact that the belief in the existence of vampires was dead serious. Today it's fiction. We enjoy a good vampire movie, and every year we get a new one. We think they're funny, we think they're sexy, we think they're romantic, but these were real. These were things that people feared, and these vampire graves serve as testament to that.
In modern fiction, vampires are depicted as suave, charismatic men and women. The most famous of which, of course, was Count Dracula. Curiously, there are self-confessed vampires still living in the world today. And they're not rampaging through the Carpathian Mountains in Eastern Europe. They live in Slough, in the west of London. And their names? Arrow Draven and Leah Benninghoff.
There's vampires everywhere. Vampires can be doctors, nurses, solicitors, bank managers, mechanics, someone working in the local supermarket, your friends, your family. We could be anyone.
When I first saw that he was a vampire, it was very interesting. I was like, okay, didn't know there was actually proper real vampires out there. I've always hoped there was. And to finally meet one was actually very interesting, to finally get to know what it really is and everything, what the lifestyle's like and everything like that.
I wasn't concerned about anyone having bad thoughts about me turning Leah, because the only thing that was of concern to me was what Leah wanted. She wanted me to turn her. I explained to her whatever questions she asked, I answered for her. Said that she had to think about it carefully, because it's not like saying, oh, I want to go get a new pair of earrings. You know, it's a whole different change of lifestyle. But it's what she truly wanted, and we were already a couple at that point. So it was natural for me to agree to turn her.
There is that whole erotic sense of vampirism and drinking each other's blood, that kind of intimate connection to it, but really there's no benefit from it.
Leah says that she can remember the exact moment that Arrow turned her into a vampire and she drank human blood for the first time.
He turned me into a vampire. It had to be at night at 3 a.m. in the morning, the witching hour. And really it all consisted of he drank my blood and then I drank his blood. Like a sort of a cycle feed.
The vampire culture has people we class as donors, who are people who willingly allow us to feed from them. Like I say, there are some, I'm sure, out there who would try and take it by force, but most of us believe in, respecting other people's wishes, other people's bodies. We don't do anything to harm others, or, even for, whether it's for our own benefit or anything else.
Why is it said that vampires drink blood?
Blood is identified with life force. If you take something's blood out, it dies. So it's a metaphor for just taking its life force away.
But isn't it poisonous? Drinking blood? It's not good for you, right?
To actually drink blood, yes, it's not very good for you. The animals that do it are especially adapted for it, vampire bats and so forth. You can get iron poisoning and kidney failure. So if you're going to drink blood, stick to small quantities.
There are many people in this day and age that believe that they are vampires. They become blood brothers, blood sisters. Some of them carry a vial of blood around their neck, or their partner's blood around their neck. They drink blood. Some of them, God forbid, make sacrifices of chickens and various things. Dress in black as goths. Wear false fangs sometimes. They believe it. They love it. It's sexy.
There's something marginal in society about the attraction of being gothic, or that whole goth persona, dressing differently, putting on that persona of darkness, and vampire culture kind of goes along with that, doesn't it? Being rebellious, being different.
They don't have fangs, they're not biting each other, but they're taking systematically blood from their body and giving it to their mate to drink. So it's almost like a cult of intimacy. They sleep during the day, they're out at night, they live the entire vampire lifestyle, at least as closely as they can.
As well as those who enjoy drinking each other's blood, there's said to be an altogether darker side of this phenomena. John Michelson, a pseudonym, is a former city trader in London who claims that he was attacked one night by a group of real-life vampires who assaulted him at a party and then drank his blood. Today, he says, he's on a mission to investigate and expose their activities and believes his life is in danger. He agreed to talk to me as long as he covered his face.
Vampires exist, but not the way that you think they do. If you think about society today, for example, in England, there are about 15,000 vampires in the UK, according to research poll, if you believe that. You have those who experiment, role play, meeting at venues, bars, clubs, internet forums, and then people are requesting to be donors. So out of these 15,000, say 10–20% are actually in the practice of bloodletting, blood drinking. But for some people, that's not enough. Then there's that, where do we go next with this? And that's when we get to what we think real evil is, and that's why we can say that vampires do exist. It's those that get the thrill out of taking blood from someone that doesn't want it taken in the first place. There is a group in London, the elites, shall we call them, very, very rich, very, very well protected, that want people, successful people, men, women, impressionable, limited contact with the outside world, as it were, who they want to recruit into their circle to keep the blood fresh.
Michelson claims that people are actually trafficked into London illegally to act as victims for these vampire groups, and then are attacked, their blood drained from their bodies, and many die. All this activity, he says, taking place under the radar of the police and the media.
They're very clever in the way they do this, in the same way that someone might pay for sexual services or some kind of domination. They mask it under this. So they surround themselves with gangs, as it were, gangs from Eastern Europe and from Turkey, who kind of provide a front for this kind of activity. So they deliver the goods, they then take what they want and then give it back to them to deal with consequences. Have you seen someone on your street who is trafficked? How would you know? In the same way as if I said, there is a vampire on your street, how would you know? They don't dress in capes. They don't fly about at night hanging on street corners. They don't howl when there's a full moon. They do none of that. They are people who once had morals, who have abandoned that because it's okay. You can find people with a similar interest online who want to be like you. There are people who role play, and there are people who play for real.
As long as there have been vampires, there have been people who have tried to hunt and kill them. But it's said that you need special equipment to do so.
Now, bear with me on this, but I've been told that the Royal Armouries Museum has a bona fide vampire killing kit on display here in Leeds. Let's go check it out.
The curator at the museum, Jonathan Ferguson, is something of a horror movie buff and thought it would be interesting to have a piece of genuine vampire lore on display here in Leeds. And he wasn't wrong. Since it first appeared a few years ago, it has attracted tens of thousands of visitors, all eager to see how you could go about killing a vampire.
Okay, Jamie, this is what I wanted to show you. This is our vampire killing kit. So this contains everything you might need to dispatch a vampire. Some of the stuff you know from fiction, some of the stuff perhaps from folklore as well, all mixed in together. So I suppose most obviously we've got the gun here. This is a real gun, Victorian, 1850s or 60s. Kind of the Saturday night special of its day, not that expensive to buy, very simple to operate.
Okay, so this is a real gun, right?
Absolutely.
And this would fire silver bullets?
That's a big debate. Our kit didn't come with any silver bullets. Some of them do. The silver bullet is more or less werewolves.
So if the gun doesn't do the job, what else have we got?
Well, now in the middle of a fight against a vampire, I wouldn't necessarily want to be doing this. However, we gently remove this.
Yes, look at that.
It's a bit like a box of chocolates. There's a second layer.
Can I dive in here, please? There we go, that's what I've been looking for.
Yeah.
So that, for me, is the most kind of iconic weapon that you could use against a vampire. Stake through the heart, right?
If people do happen to encounter a vampire, there are only two ways of killing it. Number one, cut off its head. Number two, ram a wooden or a metal stake right through its heart. End of story. Job done.
So this isn't authentic. Is that what you're saying? This is sort of vampire memorabilia.
I don't think we'll ever know for sure. That's why they are wonderfully mysterious things. It's not impossible that 100 or so years ago someone came up with one of these things, perhaps as a bit of a joke.
Going back 200 years, when people did very much believe in vampires, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they would have had implements in the home to kill them?
Certainly not impossible. Perhaps the biggest thing against it would be the people that believed in this stuff, that actually tried to kill vampires, did it with found objects. They did it with stakes, spades, scythes, that kind of thing, which is why they don't survive. So again, a great thing for us to have, to tell people all about the history of protecting yourself from things that maybe don't exist.
What's curious is that more and more so-called vampire bodies are being unearthed around the world. In Romania during February 2003, several relatives of a local farmer, Toma Petra, feared that he had become a vampire. They dug up his corpse, tore out his heart, burned it, and mixed the ashes with water in order to drink it. I read about a guy recently in Romania who was thought to have been a vampire?
Yeah, that was pretty recent. That was Toma Petra, and he had died. His family thought that he may be acting in a vampiric way because one of his relatives became ill. So they dug him up, they got his heart, they reduced it to ashes, and they fed the ashes to her. And she did recover, so it worked for them.
And this is only 12 years ago?
Yes, I think that these kinds of folklore still exist all over the place. People still believe in stuff.
So the chap dies, they bury him in a grave, and then in the next sort of couple days, family and villagers become ill, particularly the daughter of his brother-in-law, who becomes so concerned that he is, well, obviously coming back from the dead to prey on his family and the villagers, that he and his 5 mates go dig him up. They take out his heart and they burn it at a crossroads, and they pin his legs to the coffin. All the things that you would do to somebody who you thought was a vampire. The only difference is, this is 2003, and guess what? He and his 5 mates, all 6 of them, got 6 months in prison.
This was way, way beyond just some folklorish superstition, because these people were doing things like going down to the graveyard and digging up their own mother, their own daughter, their own uncle, and hammering a stake through their hearts, cutting them open, cutting their heads off. Totally horrific, but they felt, with everything that they were, that they had to do this to save themselves and to save their village.
While traditions might fade, superstitions die really hard. And in Eastern Europe, you know, they're as real today as they ever were. And that case in Croatia is a great example. This is not ignorance. This is people believing what their grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents before them believed. As far as they're concerned, it's reality.
In the 1970s, stories began to emerge of a vampire roaming around at night here in Highgate Cemetery. Amid stories of strange goings-on and people being attacked and blood sacrifices, the press had a field day. But what was really going on?
Highgate vampire stories are really the ultimate British B-movie. You have, mob exorcism going on. You have someone running around claiming that he's chasing vampires. You have British bobbies running all over the place, hunting for vampires and ghosts in the night. Really, it's kind of a crazy mob scene, isn't it?
A group of ghost hunters in the 1960s, early 70s were ghost hunting in Highgate Cemetery. It was pretty derelict by this time, and one of them spent the night there and believes that he saw a ghost, a figure dressed in a cape wandering through Highgate Cemetery.
It all starts in sort of the 1960s when the Satanists are doing rituals in the tombs in the cemetery in Highgate. And what they find is that on the walls of the tombs are images of an entity they're trying to manifest. And people who have analyzed this have been led to believe that if manifested, this entity would stay.
On Halloween, whether it's the same group or another group, actually broke into the cemetery, dug up a recent grave, spread flowers in circles in the graveyard, and hammered a metal stake through the coffin lid and through the heart of the person in the grave. Why they did it, where it came from, I don't know, but it's now become a famous legend.
Large numbers of amateur vampire hunters flocked to the cemetery, and one of them even got himself arrested. His name is David Farrant, and I've come to Highgate to meet him.
What was it that you saw in Highgate Cemetery that night?
Well, I can't tell you, except it was a very tall figure, almost as tall as the gate. That is the top gate of Highgate Cemetery. Now, I didn't know if it was floating above the ground, because the bottom of the figure seemed to disappear into blackness. I could only really see where it was higher, and it was highlighted against the sky. And also the area around myself had turned icy cold. Bear in mind it was a bitterly cold night anyway, in December. And I got the impression that it seemed to be trying to communicate with me.
What was it trying to say to you?
It's not so much trying to say something, it was draining me of energy. It's almost like I felt I was being hypnotised, sort of falling into a dream I had no control over.
Most people see what they want to see. So if you'd gone along to Highgate Cemetery in search of a paranormal figure floating around in there, you may have seen a tramp walk across the graveyard and gone, oh, I saw it. It was there, I absolutely saw it, and then it disappeared. And then you see something like a dead animal, and you think, oh, well, that must have been what the vampire ate. Then a newspaper gets hold of it. Newspaper says a figure was seen eating a fox, draining it of its blood, coming out of a tomb, when in reality nothing like that was ever said. But people read the newspaper, the next generation of vampire hunters comes along, expecting to see that, and they see what they expect to see again. And so the story sort of self-perpetuates.
There was quite a press furore at the time. I've seen the clippings, and I've seen pictures of you being arrested at that time. Why were you arrested?
We were holding a vigil, and we cast a circle by the grave of a 17th century pirate. And the police turned up. Admittedly, we had a few symbols on the ground, magical symbols. We were trying to communicate with that. And ironically, the police turned up just as the church clock was striking midnight. All of a sudden, these figures came charging out of the underground. And I was arrested and charged with indecency in a churchyard.
David Farrant, sort of head of the British Occult Society, had a really important role in the whole Highgate vampire story. He's the one who's going into the tombs and uncovering the fact that there were satanic rituals going on there. He's the one who identifies this entity that's trying to be manifested, and he's the one who kind of goes on this journey to find the vampire.
When this story broke, it caused quite a reaction, didn't it, in London?
Yes, especially in Highgate. When you start mentioning words like black magic, Satanists, vampires, people get very, very hostile, which is why I never described it as a vampire. I described it as a ghost. And that's the sort of thing I was looking into, and also quite a few of the other local pubs around Highgate, where this black tall figure has also been sighted, to see if there was any connection between the two figures.
If it isn't a vampire up at Highgate Cemetery, what is it?
Well, as I said, I think it's an unexplained entity, a ghost, something that may have remained earthbound, which has been seen. Let's remember this, it's been seen by many, many local people, not just myself. I only saw what 2 other people had already witnessed.
Curiously, to this day, there's reports in Swain Lane, which is the road that goes right by Highgate Cemetery, of civilians reporting to the police seeing a tall man with dark, piercing red eyes walking across the street and through the wall. Now, they know nothing about the Highgate Cemetery vampire. It's sort of a cult subject. Not everyone knows about it, but this gets reported to the police every 2 or 3 years. So it's quite curious that there continues to be the sort of spotting of an entity that people associate with the vampire.
And is what you saw still there?
Yes. It's there. It's been sighted very, very recently. And not only the actual figure itself, but people have had experiences there by the top gate. There's some sort of energy there which affects mobile phones and affects cameras. Often people have tried to take a picture after having a tour of the cemetery, and the battery's fully charged. It just goes dead. There are loads more people we have on record, and we can't possibly say they were all imagining more or less the same thing. It's been witnessed by many other people.
So let's be real. I mean, the account of the Highgate vampire, fantastic, entertaining, enthralling, romantic, sexy, all of that. But is it real? I really doubt it.
From the reports of vampires roaming through Highgate Cemetery to burials in Bulgaria and real-life bloodsuckers in Slough, this culture is well and truly alive. And thanks to TV shows like True Blood, it's gained a whole new generation of fans. But are any of the stories of vampires true, or is it all just a gothic fantasy? And at the end of the day, there's one question that stands out above all others. Just how good is it for you to actually drink someone else's blood?
I can categorically tell you that there is absolutely no benefit whatsoever from drinking blood, either from a chalice or from biting someone in the neck. It goes in one end and out the other. End of story.
We're told there's an energy rush in drinking blood. You know, it's a highly taboo thing to do. But in reality, the dangers, i.e. the diseases, far outweigh any potential health benefits.
The irony is, after centuries of the menace of vampires, something hideous coming at you, stinking of the grave, and you running away because it's pure nightmare, now you have all millions of young girls thinking, vampires, wonderful, bite me, bite me.
To be honest, I think that today people are playing at being vampires. I think they're taking something from myth, they're taking something that's been really current in popular film, and trying to live it out.
So, are vampires real? Or is the whole legend born out of ignorance and superstition, fueled by the likes of Bram Stoker and Count Dracula? Certainly those people that drove the stakes through the torsos of those bodies in Bulgaria thought they were real. But it seems to me that nowadays most people who believe themselves to be vampires are simply playing out some kind of gothic fantasy. More Count Duckula than Dracula. I'll see you next time.